Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the On with Shahan podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest. I actually met him in person at the Bitcoin 2019 conference, and I was following him on Twitter for quite some time. And he was gracious enough to accept the invite to come on the show. He's a Bitcoin bull. He's the host of the Keiser Report and the founder of Heisenberg Capital. He was also a comedian for a short time, and maybe we can talk about that too. But my guest is Max Keiser. Max, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Shahan, pleasure to be with you, sir.
Thank you, thank you. So there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to cover today. The reason why I really like to follow you is you cover a very broad range of topics, and you're an expert in many different areas. So I wanted to cover a bunch of different topics that I know you're going to have a ton of insight into. The first one, big piece of news, Kanye West announced recently that he's going to be running for president, or it was kind of like a cryptic tweet. And then there's like Brock Pierce entered the race, Paris Hilton. I can't even tell who's joking or not. What do you think is going on with the political landscape? Do you think Kanye West is a serious contender? Do you think this is like some type of publicity stunt? What do you think is going on in the race right now?
Well, the White House has become a major entertainment center. So in America, you've got New York, Los Angeles, you've got where Graceland, where Memphis, right? Memphis, Tennessee. You've got country music of course, came out of another great area, Nashville. And so the White House is like become a huge entertainment destination. So people use it like they would who are in entertainment and finance and technology. And so running for president or being president, Ronald Reagan certainly kicked that off. He made it into a major entertainment venue. And then you had a lot of movies and shows based on the White House, whether it was like West Wing or you had those disaster films about blowing up the White House and Air Force One. And so the presidency and the White House are a prop now in the American narrative. It's no longer has anything to do with the political process. It's more about the the entertainment industrial complex. And so Kanye is a really successful entrepreneur. And whether it's Donald Trump or Kanye or Ronald Reagan, right, that usually means a path into the White House. So I think that his announcement, I think it will take shape and there will be some follow through and we will see something going on there. I also think that it might be something with Donald Trump kind of orchestrating something in the background where his intention could be to put Kanye in the cabinet. They could make him Secretary of State or something like that. And the way to do that would be to have him run for president, get enormous support, and then at the last minute, he throws his weight behind Trump. And then Trump says, Kanye, showed that the people would love him in a leadership role, so we're going to bring him into the cabinet. I could see that happening. As far as these other folks like Brock Pierce or Paris Hilton, it reminds me of the gubernatorial runoff that happened a few years back that ended up with Arnold Schwarzenegger becoming governor, right? So that was another, entertainer slash politician. And there was something like 400 or 500 people who entered the race to be governor of California. And I think at that time I was living in Los Angeles. I think I actually ran for governor of California. I can't remember. Wow. There's so many people that did. And so I think this become just like guaranteed headlines. Paris Hilton obviously is not on the bleeding edge of entertainment these days. Brock Pierce, is never shy to try to get as much publicity as possible, right? So this is and there's certainly a PR winner. He's interesting because he does have connections to the White House through Steve Bannon, who was, remember, Trump's kind of guru back in 2016. He's actually was an employee of Brock Pierce going back a few years. And Brock rented him out some office space in LA, and they're pretty close. And he does have close ties to the White House. And he does have close ties to people like Peter Thiel. And he is an interesting character for sure. But overall, in terms of Kanye, I think that we're going to see some more coming out of this. I think he will really push this because it makes sense, because he's reached a level of success. He and his wife Kim Kardashian are both extremely successful,
Right.
and you know, this is now de rigueur in America. You know, if you reach a certain amount of success, you do LA, New York, White House, right? It's part of the scene now. You got to have a White House play to be fully developed as a superstar in America.
Right. And I think that point you made about, you know, Kanye taking it up to the finish line and then maybe saying, hey, we're doing a joint thing, like similar to, I think that's why Bernie was part of the Democratic ticket with the progressives and taking that to the finish line and then saying, hey, my support goes to whatever candidate wins. And that has brought over that group as well. I like that this is happening because it muddies the waters a little bit. I think there should be more candidates. I think it's all positive. Let the best person win in this. But I know if it becomes like this crazy celebrity contest, I guess it's weird, but hasn't backfired yet. I mean, we've had some good success from this. But I think more candidates in the race is a good thing. So speaking of that and the different people entering, Kanye is a Bitcoin supporter. Andrew Yang was a Bitcoin supporter. John McAfee, you know, he had some type of campaign. He was a Bitcoin supporter. Let's talk Bitcoin and what is going on right now. I actually have a HODL sticker here too. I see you have a HODL shirt. So what's going on with the Bitcoin landscape? And for those that don't know, my audience, I would say, is part of the next wave of Bitcoiners. And I think right now is a very ripe time to convert these people over. So could you give just a bit of an explainer of what Bitcoin is at a high level and then why it's important in this current macroeconomic landscape?
Right. Well, Bitcoin, you know, there's so many ways you can get into it, right? It has multiple entry points. You can look into it from the technology. You can look into it from the monetary policy. You can look into it as a social phenomenon. And there's different ways to think about it. Let's say, for the purposes of this conversation, you know, Bitcoin is global and it separates the state from money. And so this is acting out in a big way in countries like Venezuela, Iran, Zimbabwe, where countries that are experiencing extreme financial duress or hyperinflation, and people are turning to Bitcoin in a big way because it's their escape route out of these horrible monetary policies, the fiat money policies. In Great Britain, there's a huge now curve of adoption as people start to worry about, you know, what the future is there post-Brexit, things like that. And so again, the loss of confidence in the system is driving Bitcoin adoption. Loss of confidence in fiat money is driving Bitcoin adoption. Those who like gold also like Bitcoin. You know, because of it's essentially the digital version of gold. So when people say, how do you get people interested in Bitcoin? It's driven by people who are under a lot of stress. And it's like trying to say, how do you get somebody into rehab, right? Somebody needs rehab. How do you get them into rehab? Well, usually there's nothing you can say to get people into rehab. They have to get to the point where they just have no other choice in life. They end up going to rehab, right? And Bitcoin adoption is like that. It's like people would do anything not to get into Bitcoin, right? The path of resistance is very high. It's very difficult to get into Bitcoin to comprehend really what it's all about, and people just don't want to go there because it's hard. But when the fiat money system around us is just really looking horrible, confidence in the system is looking bad. People say, well, you know, why is the stock market, why is NASDAQ going to new all-time highs? Well, the same reason that the stock market in Venezuela, Iran, and Zimbabwe is going to new all-time highs, because confidence in their local currency has collapsed. Right. And they're experiencing hyperinflationary collapse. We don't have hyperinflationary collapse in the U.S., but we do have a loss of currency in the U.S. dollar. And I think it's driving a lot of money, you know, safe haven money is going into stocks. It's going into gold. Gold has made new all-time highs against all major currencies around the world. It's inching toward making a new all-time high against the dollar. It's flirting with $1,800. Today, it looks like, that it's pretty easy, a 2-foot putt from here to 2000. And then once it kind of breaks through 2000, I think you're going to see a very quick markup to 2,400, 2,500. This is going to drive a lot more anxiety in terms of the fiat money. Confidence in the US dollar will continue to fall. So the answer is, where are we at in the Bitcoin, history of Bitcoin? What's happening with Bitcoin? Bitcoin, pretty much the Genesis block of January 3rd, 2009, everything was basically cooked into the, baked in. Everything was baked in, The DNA, Bitcoin was birthed with the DNA to do exactly what it's doing, right? The fetus that it was in January of 2009 is growing up based on the protocol, the code of the protocol. And I would say Bitcoin is now, maybe in human lifespan terms, it's going through puberty. And on the other side of this puberty, it'll be more of an adult at the 50,000 to 100,000 price range before it becomes a warrior. And you'll see it, in the multi-$100,000 range.
Do you have like a time scale for that? I know you've said stuff like 2021 or 2022, I think 100,000 and eventually 400,000. So you think these things will happen within the next 10 years or so?
Well, I never put a date on it. Sometimes in the press, they quote me as putting a date on it, but I never do.
Okay.
It's all tied to dollar collapse. So it depends. Once the dollar collapses and you have a hyperinflationary collapse, then gold and Bitcoin are going to be marked up dramatically overnight. Gotcha. So you either you got to prepare now, or you're going to be unprepared. So forget about trying to figure out exactly when it's going to make the move. It's tied to the US dollar. The US dollar and the Bitcoin and gold are all competing with each other right now. So, and the dollar is, it's on its last leg. So, but you have to, until it collapses, we gotta wait. It's like, again, if you're using the puberty analysis, you get out of puberty, you get your driver's license, right? Well, Bitcoin is in puberty and it won't get its driver's license until the dollar collapses, and then it's ready to go.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and does it matter that it's just the dollar, Max? I mean, like all other currencies are not doing well, so it's like any currency for that matter, right? But the dollar is a big one.
Well, the dollar is world reserve currency, and all commodities are priced in dollars. Oil is priced in dollars. You can't buy oil without first buying dollars. Trade deficits are all based on US dollar hegemony. It's the American foreign policy is based on having US dollar world reserve currency. And so it's the basis of the American empire, and the world runs as an American empire. Every country in the world is a vassal state of the American empire, more or less, with the exception of a few.
So in addition to Bitcoin, I know that you also are one of the founders, you and Stacy, the founders of Heisenberg Capital. And in addition to investing in Bitcoin, you invest into other startups. One of the things that I do, as my business, as what I do as my career, is I consult different early stage startups. So I'm curious, from your perspective, you've been hyper successful in your fund. What are some of the things that you look at when you're investing in early stage startups?
Right. So in the VC business, and we started it in 2013, and we have a few unicorns in there. Probably the biggest one being Kraken, which they just did a valuation of $4 billion, and for the seed capital was at a $5 million valuation, I believe.
Congratulations.
Right, and there's a few others that are looking like there could be, or will be soon, unicorns. Bitso in Mexico is doing incredibly well, and Unicoin in India, they were silent for a while. Now they're back in the game. But in the VC business, there really is no formula to it. You just have to put a lot of money to work in a lot of different places. And maybe 1 out of 10 will work. 8 out of 10 probably will go to zero. one of them, something will kind of be okay. And then that 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 has to be big enough to support the whole enterprise.
Right.
So, I didn't know when we invested in Kraken that was going to be the one, right? So I had no idea. But looking at it now, I would say that the difference between success and failure in these startups is really comes down to the CEO, founder, and where, do they have the stamina? Because it takes a lot of energy and stamina to go through 5, 6, 7 years of startup. So you really have to have incredible stamina. Do they have the ability to lead a team or inspire a team? Are people going to take a bullet for this guy? If you look at those early videos of Jack Ma from Alibaba when he's just starting the company, there's a famous video of him talking to like 7 or 8 people in a room and saying, you people basically have to be able to, you want to take a bullet for me in this vision. And if you are, we're all going to be billionaires, to be able to convey that and have a team and put a team together, I think is really key. Also, usually the founding team is figures out a way not to take much money, in terms of salary and stuff like that. If they're draining the bank account and salary and stuff, that's generally, it generally is a bad situation that doesn't work really. You have to make incredible sacrifices. So, but the point being that, as I said, it wasn't obvious that Kraken would turn out to be the way it did. And a couple of others that looked really promising, didn't work out. So it's a binary, decision really. It's either works or doesn't work. And I guess also, I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles in a previous business of mine, and it's very similar in the film business where, films either works or doesn't work. Films rarely just kind of muddle through. They either really hit and big, or they just kind of, everyone loses money. And so, the studio model is always, we got to make, 50, 60 films because we need to find 1 or 2 that are going to pay for this whole thing. It's really hard to know, to figure out what's going to do well in the market. I would say it's impossible. But same thing with the VC business. It's a similar business.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit on so many points there, like the founders making sacrifices, knowing the long-term sacrifices that you're going to have to make, reinvesting back into the business. But like you said, it's very difficult to tell until some time has gone by. They go through a coronavirus and survive the other side of it. Thank you for that insight. So another thing that I wanted to cover, because you are an insider in media, I think what's going on in mainstream media right now is a cause for a lot of the world's problems. In terms of how things are being framed, the sensationalization of the things that are going on, and agendas that people have and the narratives that people are trying to push. So it doesn't seem like things are what they appear to be at face value. I think there's a lot of wars going on underneath with different factions and different groups, and I think there's going to be some people turning on each other. But what do you think is going on in mainstream media as an insider? Do you think there is this war going on? I mean, one of the interesting things I heard is The Hill was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they were talking about how they're given a message of the day and the talking points of the day every day for what they're going to push on in the media. And I thought that was crazy. It was just a look behind the curtain that these things are being pushed. So what do you think is going on as an insider?
Well, the big, if you look at the history of broadcast media in America going back 30 or 40 years, 50 years, you had a transition from public airwaves and public funded media to corporate media. So when I was a kid, we still had a lot of public media. We still had the public broadcasting system. We still had local free access cable. You had a lot of stuff was on free access cable, and it was local media. It had a lot of local radio stations. And this is before the rise of the mega coast to coast, super big national radio networks. And you had a lot more diversity even in the corporate space. So there were 30 or 40 media companies. Now there's only 5 or 6 big ones, and it's consolidating all the time. And so it's corporate. It's a product sold by corporations, like selling, shoes or foods or breakfast cereal, or it's the news is not the news in the sense that it's there to inform the public of what's happening in a information sense. It's the news is just part of the entertainment industrial complex, right? It's just an extension of this corporate corpocracy, I guess you could call it. I mean, there's the corporations really have consumed and devoured all the public space. And even free speech, the reason why it's being curtailed so much is because it is to accommodate corporations, right? So the reason corporations don't want people exercising free speech on Twitter or other social media is because it sometimes challenges their brand and challenges their sales pitch. And so in the interest of corporations, they will shut down these free speech, and they'll say, well, it's a corporation. So, Twitter is a corporation or Facebook's a corporation, so they're not even entitled to free speech. And but the point is that in order for Twitter and Facebook and Google to become multi-hundred billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies, they had to do so by extinguishing and encroaching on our public domain. And the public domain is the definition of a healthy democracy and a healthy republic, is the size of its public domain. And in the United States, up until 100 years ago or so, we had a very robust public domain, public parks, national parks, libraries free everywhere. Education was very cheap to free. Healthcare was manageable. And so these things are part of the public domain that is the definition of a healthy republic or a democracy. And over the past few decades, these things have all been corporatized and turned into and unregulated, right? So part of the corporate agenda is to dismantle all regulations. So the healthcare has become atrocious, education has become abysmal, the public space is polluted or shrunk or corporatized or branded. And it's created a population that is rotting. Let's say the average American is rotting from the inside, rotting from opiates, rotting from misinformation, rotting from fiat money, and they stink. It's a putrid population of rotting no-good-nicks and charlatans and scammers all trying to scam each other. And the news and the corporate media and the corporate news is kind of glorifying gangsterism and the putrefaction of public dialogue is celebrated in corporate media. And to sell unregulated, dangerous, toxic products and weapons. So you end up with quite a dystopian cesspool. That's my short answer.
No, that is great. And the reason why, I want to cover that, it's coming up right now where CNN used to play the middle, or we thought perception was that they were in the middle. Now it's not. Now it's very obvious where everybody lies. And what's, I think, really shown the corruption that you were talking about is the coverage. One of the topics I've been looking at is like the Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and who is covering it, who is part of the story. It doesn't seem like the media is covering a lot of this stuff. Do you think that, well, first of all, what are your thoughts on the Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell? Have you been following that pretty closely? I know you tweeted a couple things about it, but I heard this Friday she's going to be testifying and she's naming names. So there are a lot of powerful people really scared right now.
Well, the story of Jeffrey Epstein and his death, I think, is quite remarkable. In that the only thing I could compare it to would be the assassination of John F. Kennedy, right? Because you remember Lee Harvey Oswald was the patsy, and then he was killed by Jack Ruby, and then he went missing, or his testimony was questioned, and then the report came out, and it was highly questionable, lots of holes. It was an attempted coup in the United States, right? So we had a coup attempt back in the early 60s. Right. We had another coup attempt in 2016. After Trump took office, the so-called deep state, or what have you, the entrenched career bureaucrats and civil servants decided, this guy might fire us. So let's do a little coup. Let's stage a coup. And now, 4 years later, we have all the evidence has come out. They tried to coup in America. So that's the two times we've seen coups. There was another coup of I believe FDR. There was an attempt by General Smedley. I mean, I haven't refreshed my memory on this whole story, but there was an attempted coup of FDR. So that's 3 attempted coups. So then brings us up to Jeffrey Epstein, and this is a very dark chapter in American history, and his death is it shows that anybody with deep enough pockets can walk into a federal prison and murder a witness.
Right.
If they have, that's not a healthy situation. That's not a healthy situation. So as far as Maxwell's concerned, I don't see how this is going to be different. The chances of anyone getting seriously indicted to me is virtually zero. I mean, I don't even, I think I tweeted something like, I'm not even going to even follow this because it's the end. I've seen the ending. It's like, I've seen this movie already. I just saw it last year with Epstein. So now they're doing the Epstein movie, as a cheap video, straight to video knockoff, right? It's like, I already saw Star Wars. I don't need to see some stupid knockoff of Star Wars that goes straight to video, right? It's going to be a cheap version of it. But they're going to hire cheaper hitmen, it's going to be salacious, of course, but it's also going to be shambolic. It's going to be even. They're going to hire even less qualified people to do this mess, right? So it's going to be really like the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges meet. It's going to be really stupid. I'm 100% sure of the outcome, and everyone is in their heart of hearts. They know what's going to happen, and that's where we're at in this country. We can't compete on merit, right? We can't compete with China with quality products. Where the dollar's losing its world reserve currency, the country's rioting everywhere, coast to coast. The empire is collapsing. There's not much anyone can do at this point.
Is there any ways to turn? I know getting to Bitcoin, I think that's a big thing. Make a healthy financial system. But what other things do you think can help right the ship? I mean, I think a big thing is a void in leadership right now that we don't have at all across. And then I also think that if we look at the politicians and their, I don't want to be an ageist in any way, but there are certain things about technology that we have to be made aware of, and people need to have some level of competence in, like AI, Bitcoin, for example, any other technology in terms of defense, cyber warfare, all those things. I feel like there's incompetence across the board with leadership. But do you think there are some ways, at least some easy wins initially that the U.S. can do to kind of right some of these wrongs?
Yeah, Yeah, if I were made leader of America, my first order of business would be to revoke all intellectual property laws.
Hmm.
Copyright and patents would be made all freely available. And that would just create an explosion of creativity.
Right.
And that's what we need. We need a renaissance. And the only way to get that renaissance is to unjail ideas that are imprisoned by corporations. Thomas Jefferson, when they were discussing copyright law, the compromise was 17 years, I believe, with a 17-year extension, give or take a couple of years. And there was a big debate when they were framing the Constitution about copyright, because Jefferson was of the belief that you shouldn't really have any copyright. But of course, the cost of producing original works and then reproducing them was quite high. So they said, okay, if you give a temporary monopoly for the creator of these ideas, they will be encouraged to create stuff because they get a temporary monopoly and they can make money on it. So, okay, that makes some sense. But over the decades, right, the Hollywood lobbying machine in Washington has extended that 17 years to, I think it's something like lifetime plus 90 years, or what Lawrence Lessig would call perpetual copyright. So these ideas remain permanently on corporate balance sheets, and they're not free to circulate. It's like we've given ourselves a lobotomy, right? Our birthright is to these ideas. They should be, like Jefferson, I can accept that they would be awarded temporary monopoly for maybe 15 years. But then they need to re-enter the public domain from where they came. All ideas come from the public domain. There are no purely original ideas. Everything is a remix from something else. You get temporary copyright, and then it goes back to the public domain from where it came from. If that one simple change in the way America handles copyright, intellectual property, and patents, and I'm a patent holder. I mean, I have a patent in my name, right? So I know the patent system. And that would unleash American creativity. And people would be so busy creating stuff and reinventing the country that they wouldn't be on the street protesting, because they'd be like, that's a waste of time. I don't want to go down to the street with a sign complaining about something because I'm creating something here at my house that's genius, that I love it, and I want to share it. And right, so that's the one stroke. You could make that change in a week, and it would completely go from a country heading into a tar pit of irrelevance and extinction to a vibrant renaissance, bright future.
I think that's so spot on, because it unlocks thought and freedom and creativity, and all of those things have such a domino effect across other things, because everybody will be creative. Everyone wants to start building things, start creating things, and that creates now an environment of America, which we saw, this entrepreneurship. But once we started outsourcing everything and the supply chains are outside, and different people had IP laws in different countries, they were able to have more flexibility, and we don't have that. I think that would solve a lot of the problems that we have today. And I talk a lot about mindset. I think having the freedom to be creative without limitations, or at least very limited limitations, I think would free us up for a lot of things. Have you thought about, I know you tweet about this as well, but have you thought about running for public office?
No.
Not going to happen. It's too much drama.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's where you would have an impact, or an impact can be made. The system is, it's not really one where I just don't see that. I mean, I'm open to, if somebody can convince me that's a good idea, I'll listen to them, but I don't see how that's a good idea.
Right. Yep. It's not for everyone. I'm sure people have asked you to run because you have so much common sense and, like I said, expertise in a lot of different areas. One of the things I really admire about you and Stacy, something my wife and I are trying to do as well is you guys work really well together. On camera, you have a great dynamic. You clearly are running this fund together. What is some advice you can give? We're getting better at it. When we first started our marriage the first year, it was a disaster. We couldn't work together. We were living together, working together. It didn't work at all. And then we both lived corporate lives, and then now we're working for ourselves again. And it's working a lot better now. But from someone like yourself who's done it so successfully for so long, do you have any advice for couples working together?
No,
No.
it's this is something that you have to work at, just like anything else. So first of all, you have to want it to work. You have to say, I want this to work, and then you have to, like everything else, you have to work at it. It's like, what can I do today to make this better than it was yesterday? Right? It doesn't happen by itself. So it's just you just have to want it. It's just say, look. What can I do to make this work? And so then, you go at it like that. It's like everything is comes down to having good habits, I guess you could say. It's just doing positive things repetitiously over time has a positive impact, right? So it applies to health, diet, work, everything. There's a good way to do it, and there's a not so good way to do it based on who you are, right? Everyone's different. So there's no one way that works for everybody, but everybody has access to their own feelings and their own mind. So your feelings and your mind will tell you if you are on the right track or not, and when you're on the right track, you know it in your heart. When you're on the wrong track, you also know it. You feel like suddenly outside, off the path that you want to be on or you should be on. But it's different for everybody, but everybody has the ability to know that and have that self knowledge. And sometimes you don't want to listen to that, that self. You're, as a human, you're going to kind of skew toward balance and having a balanced relationship with everything, the world, yourself, your place in it. And, but to be able to sense when you're in a state of balance, that's pretty much the only job to do, really. I mean, because usually, especially when you're talking about the politics and the corporate media, and the information is very warped. All of that, it really makes it challenging for people to have an inner sense of balance.
Right.
If you have an inner sense of truth, which everybody does, it's constantly being challenged by these outside forces, and they're not interested in your balance and your preservation of your sanity. They don't really care about you. So how to filter that out, how to have a relationship with what is 99% of the information you get is toxic, right? So how do you filter that out? Because filtering stuff out is very important. Every living species has to filter stuff out. Right. Plants have to filter stuff out. Animals have to filter stuff out, and they're surrounded by stuff that if it gets in, it's toxic, right? Mm-hmm. So you have different filters. You have your skin, you have your lungs, you have your thoughts, your mind. This is all based to filter out the bad stuff and to allow the good stuff to have a safe place to grow. And so there's a balance there, right? And sometimes you're out of balance, but because it's fun, because, hey, I'm crazy, I'm completely out of balance. Look at me, I'm nuts, right? And it's fun. But then you have to be able to get quickly back in balance, right? You can't stay in a place of being at odds with who you are, because then it drains you. You get drained, and without energy, we're nothing. Everything is energy, comes from energy. So I mean, so that's my answer to the question. I mean, it's really personal, right? And I say that not to be evasive, but because I believe that's the case. It's just so on an individual basis, you really, it's complete, it's just different for everybody, but you just have to want it. I think that's the answer. You just have to want it.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of key points there, like self-awareness about who you are. You know you're doing the right thing. You have to want this relationship to work and put in the effort to do that. Max, I want to thank you so much for joining. But before I kind of wrap things up, was there any topics, any updates, anything that's top of mind for you that you want to discuss?
Not really. You know,
We covered a
I'm
lot.
curious to hear what you're thinking about. You know, it opens up some interesting conversation points. I think I think we're going to see more interest in Bitcoin on many different levels,
Mm,
because it's going to continue to shine as a beacon in this ever-growing confusion out there. And so I feel pretty confident about that. And it's even, you know, I think if you focus on, there's a lot that can be achieved simply by focusing on Bitcoin and how it works and why it works and how it came about.
right.
You know, that actually is an interesting point to meditate on, because the timing of it, the year it came out, how people react to it. You know, I say, if you want to know everything about somebody, have them explain Bitcoin to you,
Hmm.
because everyone explains Bitcoin in terms of what they know.
Hmm.
So people like Jordan Belfort, for example, he's a character. They made that movie Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
When he talks about Bitcoin, he reveals that his character, which is he's a career kind of scam artist, and he describes it in those terms, and so it reveals who he is. When Andreas Antonopoulos talks about Bitcoin, he's been many years. He's had a lot of very, you know, social issues, very important. And when he talks about it, you know, those come out quickly. You know, you realize this is a guy who really cares about people he meets and everything about it. So you know a lot about him from his description of Bitcoin. If you have somebody like you know, some of the early developers that dropped out of the project, like Mike Hearn or somebody like that, you know, they talk about it, and it reveals something about their background and their thoughts about technology, and so you learn a lot about it, and you understand why they dropped out,
Right.
because they never understood Bitcoin, and so it's like an ink blot test, right? You just say, so people say, how do you tell people about Bitcoin? And I think the more importantly is how do other people, when you hear other people describe Bitcoin, I think that's more important. Like, what do you think? What do people think it is? I mean, what do you think this thing is? It's a really important question, because for some people, it's very obvious what it is. And those people, you can tell that they are being enriched by this in a big way. For other people who don't get it, or they say they don't get it, that's important information to know, because they're blocking themselves from understanding something that is transformative in a very positive way for them and for their community and for the society at large. They're blocking that. They're blocking that information for some reason. So that's also very good information to know.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I speak to people about, I got in around 2016, end of 2016, that's when I got in. And it's so funny, the people in my life, some of it has to do with technology adoption, but I would just say an early adopter in general. The people that were accepting it were like, oh, this is some new cool thing. It's this internet money, censorship resistant, there's scarcity involved. And so like someone like me, I love futuristic technology, why I like early stage startups and all this. This really fascinated me. And then when I went in deeper, as an investment vehicle. When I heard from people like they're making a lot of money, then when I look deeper, to your point, it teaches you a lot about like, wait, what is going on with the financial system? What's the Fed? How are they printing this cash? Nothing is being produced. Then you're thinking like, wait, what is this cash stuff? And then they say, oh, well, the cash is backed by the US government. What does that really mean? And you start thinking about stuff, then you start questioning everything. I think there was like a common thing of like, then I questioned the media and the institution, the education systems, all these different things. And to your point, you even mentioned like Bitcoin with love too, right? Like you even associate it with love. There's so many different things that will like your mind will open up to that even don't relate to Bitcoin per se, but in some way they do, in the sense that it makes you think about other things in a whole new different way. And that was really interesting to me, of actually self-awareness of myself around, what is it in life, or from different influencers in my life or different institutions in my life, that I've just take for granted and accepted as truth without actually looking under the covers to see what it is. And it makes you such a stronger person in some ways, because it makes you look at things, be your own journalist towards these things, and say, hey, what's actually going on, versus there's 5 or 6 companies that, or a small round of families that own the world, and what is the agenda or narrative that will enrich them and help them. So I think, to your point, those were a lot of things that opened my eyes to Bitcoin and the different things that it's related to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's going to be interesting to see, because there is, I think, a certain sweet spot in the whole concept of wealth. So they noticed, I saw a study recently that said that they did a study of people in various, with various levels of wealth, from people who were in debt and had no wealth to billionaires. And they noticed that people with $20,000, $25,000 in savings, their level of happiness was essentially the same as everybody on up to $1 billion. So with Bitcoin and hard money, and it's global and it's outside of the state and it's individual sovereignty and it's unconfiscatable, I predict that at some point everybody will be at a very comfortable level of wealth. And this idea of money will change profoundly. It will change. It will no longer become this mad dash for as many billions as possible. That will be seen as a waste of one's efforts on this world. And so then you have a much different society. So in a lot of ways, I would, it gets back, I think, to before even we had money as such. Money is a somewhat new concept. It's only maybe 14,000 years old or so, after the beginning of the agricultural period in our history. And then we had the industrial period and the information period. But I think I'm going to go back to a pre-agricultural state of consciousness, where it's people, the values are more universal. So if we all are sharing similar universal ideals, then all the regional differences fade away. And so ultimately what people want to do is they want to socialize with other people and do so without problems, right? I mean, it's shocking that, like, my money can move around the world a lot easier than I can. I mean, if I go across borders, it's a big hassle, right? Why does money have more? Yeah, why does more money have more privileges than I do? Right? I should have the privilege to just go to country without the hassle. Right. But for some reason, we gave money that privilege, and we didn't keep it for ourselves. That goes against every fiber of our being. And that's why we're all in an existential crisis. That's why we're all suffering, because we gave away the best part of us to something called money, and we retain the worst part. So Bitcoin reverses it. We'll say, like, well, I just want to be able to socialize and move around the world. And, and gain knowledge and be self-actualized and be a human being. I don't want to go compete with Jeff Bezos. You know, I'm not going to catch Jeff Bezos. You know, that game. What's the point? He won. Okay, Jeff Bezos won. Okay, can we flip the Etch-a-Sketch over and shake this thing and start again? I mean, that was an interesting game, I guess. You know, Warren Buffett, what does he do with his money? He's like one of those old people that hoard old telephone books in their house. You know, they have 1,000 old telephone books. I mean, that's his wealth. He doesn't do anything with it. He's the same car, same house. He eats the same lunch, gets the same $7 haircut. He doesn't look like he's just the guy who likes to hoard paper. He's just a paper hoarder. He's a guy who collects old phone books and calendars from 30 years ago, and it's all stacked up in his basement, and then he'll be dead, and then they'll throw all that stuff away, and they'll say, wow, what would he be remembered for? Because he bought Coca-Cola cheap? That's like, wow, what a waste of a life.
Right. Yeah, and Bitcoin, I think, has its chance in this wave, I think, to make some real impact and adoption. Anecdotally, my friends and family, last time they were very skeptical. This time it's like, set me up with an account and let's get this going. And I've seen that on my social feeds, different people reaching out to me, very anecdotal, but I certainly sense a shift this time. And as trust for institutions decreases and plummets, I think this is a chance for both gold and Bitcoin to make a serious impact in this time. So Max, I know you got your, I think it's real Max Keiser on Twitter back. How do we follow you and the stuff that you're doing?
Right. My Twitter handle is now Max Keiser.
Okay, Max Keiser, sorry. Okay.
Right. So that's my Twitter handle. That was gone for a few months. Now it's back. And that's the best way to follow me, really. Anything else I'm doing, I would tweet from there.
Cool. Awesome. Max and his wife, Stacy, are the best follow. You should definitely follow them. Follow the Keiser Report. I'll have links to that. Max, I just want to say thank you so much for the time. You were so gracious with your time. You provide so many insights on a variety of different topics. I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, well, don't forget, a lot of times I talk total shit too, so. Yeah.
As do I, and I think people will be able to tell.
Yeah, sometimes I got good points, sometimes I don't, but I don't try to pretend like I know, more than the average person, because I'm always interested in new stuff. So that means you can make a lot of mistakes, but yeah, I'm open to any ideas, really, But thanks so much. This was a lot of fun, and let's check in again sometime and see what's happening.